AEW fans, y'all might want to look away on this one because I got some interesting news regarding Mercedes Moné that we're going to be talking about in today's video. And I think most WWE fans would agree with this. Yes, we're going to get a little tribal in today's video, so just weigh yourself before you get into the conversation down in the comments area below. But let's talk about Mercedes Moné today because Mercedes Moné obviously made a big name for herself in WWE. And I would say most people would agree that her AEW run hasn't necessarily lived up to the expectations, which were lofty. I don't think there's any way you can get around that. They were very lofty, they were very high, and there was a lot of hope when Mercedes Moné made the jump from AEW to WWE. Now, of course, she made a pit stop in between because after getting her release from WWE after walking out in May of 2022, wow, time flies, doesn't it? I think you have to look at the gravity of the situation, right? In terms of she had creative differences with Vince McMahon. She didn't see eye to eye, so her and Naomi walked out. They both negotiated their releases. Monet went to New Japan. Naomi went to TNA. TNA did wonders with Naomi. She later returned. And Monet, she had a great run in New Japan, right? She really set out and did some special things in New Japan. And then once her year was up, there was talk, okay, is she going to go to AEW or is she going to go back to WWE? Because her issues was with Vince McMahon. It wasn't with Triple H, right? And at that point, Triple H had already taken over the book and he was part of creative by 2023. And of course, we all know Song and Dance, Mercedes Moné, she gets injured in New Japan. She's out for the rest of 2023. And that sucked. It really derailed her momentum. And so fast forward to March 2024, she signs with AEW. She makes her grand return. And it was the big business episode of Dynamite. And there was a lot of expectations going into it because it was like, okay, we're going to have this household name, this huge name come from a WWE, come to AEW and really change up the women's division. But there was hurdles in which she had to overcome. We'll get to that in a little bit because I think you have to weigh that in. I think you have to give context to that if we're going to talk about her overall progression in AEW, which she has turned around. I'm not here to hate on Mercedes Moné. In fact, I'm here to praise Mercedes Moné. But there is a fact. There is a reality of the situation, and that leads me to that. Because WWE Hall of Famer Ric Flair, he believes that Mercedes Moné will eventually return to WWE and wrestle yet again as Sasha Banks. And he broke down his beliefs because while appearing on Busted Open Radio, Flair expressed his doubts about AEW being the right long-term home for the boss. And he argued that AEW lacks world-class competition and therefore she will remain driven. This is what he had to say, excuse me. Right now, I do think WWE is a better fit. Yeah, because she doesn't have as many good opponents over there in AEW. Everybody's good to be in the business. You got to be good. But to be great, that encompasses a whole different world. Great and good, you know what I mean? And I truly believe she will end up back there in WWE. Now, keep in mind that Moné has downplayed the possibility of returning to WWE. She's previously stated that she's happy in AEW and does not envision a WWE comeback anytime soon. Okay? So while Moné remains focused on AEW, where she recently defended the TBS title against Harley Cameron at Grand Slam Australia, I need to preference this. Number one, Moné will say that she is happy in AEW. Perhaps it's because she actually is. Perhaps it's because she's under a long-term contract and she wants to continuously work, right? Like AEW, Tony Khan, they have a history. If you badmouth the promotion, if you are critical of the promotion, they just simply won't use you and they'll just sit you, and it's ridiculous. When she signed with AEW almost a year ago, it was for a long-term deal. Like, there's been rumors, is it a 3-year deal? Is it a 4-year deal? Is it a 5-year deal? Either way, she's under a long-term deal. She's also reportedly the highest paid female in all of pro wrestling. Now, Becky Lynch recently re-signed with WWE. She could have broke the bag and she could have set a new market for women's wrestling. We don't know because we don't know the terms of her deal. She's also not yet returned as of the recording of this video. I digress. So just keeping that in mind. Like Mercedes Moné, she's not going to say, oh, yeah, I would love to go back to WWE. And I'm going to go back to WWE as soon as my AEW contract is up in 4 years, right? Like, she's not going to do that. So Of course, she's going to dismantle it or downplay it, if you will. Do I agree that she will? There's two things I want to talk about. Number one, do I agree that she will return to WWE? I think there's a very good possibility, and I'll tell you why. Mercedes Moné is a businesswoman. She does what's best for Moné's business. And you have to look at the fact that WWE is on absolute fire right now and AEW is really cold. You also have to look at the fact that she has a ton of backstory with WWE. That's where she got her big break. That's where she made a name for herself. And once again, we're not dealing with a situation in which she's going back to Vince McMahon. Even if she did go back to WWE and some reason Vince was in charge still, I think cooler heads would have prevailed. Years go by, people change, right? You kind of get over things. But the fact that Triple H is in charge, well, he booked her very well in NXT. He used her as one of the prominent pillars of NXT, setting the stage for the women's evolution, revolution, and now the golden era, right? Like, that's what he was able to do with Mercedes Moné. So, of course, you would be very open to going back to a place in which you got your start. You can probably make, I wouldn't say as much money as in AEW. I think she's being paid very, very well. But WWE, let's be real, is the top echelon of this business, right? There is no performer in AEW that when WrestleMania comes around or the Royal Rumble comes around or a SummerSlam comes around, they don't want to be a part of that card deep down inside, right? You want to be on the big stage. And WWE is the big stage. It's always been the big stage. And it will probably remain that for the rest of our time here, right? Like, I cannot envision a promotion over surpassing WWE, right? Like, even when WCW was beating Monday Night Raw in the ratings and beating WWE, while yes, they were the number one promotion in the world, I think most people also thought, they are for right now, but WWE is still the place where you want to be. That's just my opinion. I think she has a lot of friends in WWE. I think she has a lot of great storylines and matches to do in WWE. She's still very young. I also think the fact that into another conversation about Ric Flair's comments about how the best are in WWE, I would disagree with that, especially for the men. For the women, you do have some very interesting names to work with, right? Mariah May, Toni Storm, Chris Statlander, Willow Nightingale, Britt Baker when available. But if you look at the overall arc, if you look at the overall women's division, whether that's Raw, SmackDown, NXT, you put all those together, I would say WWE has a much larger and grander women's division than AEW does. That's not necessarily on AEW's roster. That's just a fact of life. So I think you have to keep that in mind when we're talking about AEW's women's division to WWE. They're just different, right?